This is the Mox Team Zirconia podcast, episode 12, the Ormendahl Challenge. Welcome to Mox Team Zirconia. I'm Colin.
And I'm Daniel.
And I'm Graham, and we are your hosts. We are a podcast about Magic the Gathering for everyone.
We hope that this podcast is helpful to anyone who is playing Magic at tournaments, from Friday Night Magic to Grand Prix.
We want to inspire you to try out your own brews, or to pick up an untested deck like one of ours, for example. Try it out, then change it to suit your needs. Our immediate goal is always and will always be to make the next deck better than the last one.
We want to learn from our triumphs and non-triumphs and refine our brewing techniques.
Reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at MoxZirconia and let us know what you think of the podcast.
We'd love to know what you think, especially if it's nice. We are now appearing in all the major podcast network searches as well, so please help us out by spreading the word to all your planeswalking friends.
That's right, and also all of our episodes are up on YouTube, so you should definitely go check out those, and you should also subscribe to the channel, because what we're doing right now is sort of the beginning of our YouTube channel. We are planning on creating shorter content coming up soon that sort of encompasses more aspects of Magic the Gathering, and we want to make sure that you are aware of those and so you don't miss them, and subscribing is a great way to do that. So, we made a deck last week, and I was really excited about it, and I thought it was really cool. Unfortunately, I've been traveling this week, so I wasn't able to test it. And so I believe that, Graham, you were our crash test dummy for this deck.
Who are you calling a dummy?
He was more the car, and the deck was the dummy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that definitely makes sense. So, Graham, you took our crash test deck out for a test drive, and you ran it through the gauntlet. So why don't you, actually, before we go into results, could you please just give us a refresher rundown about what the deck was and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the really cool things that we have discovered about the standard rotation right now is just how easy mana fixing is. And so we kind of made it our goal last week to build a 5-color deck. And we really wanted to play with the Converge mechanic. And Converge is a mechanic that gets you extra benefit from more colors. So the more colors you use to cast a spell, the more powerful that spell becomes. And we really wanted to play around with that because we know how easy it is to fix mana. So the card that we decided to build around was called Bring to Light, and it's a 5-mana sorcery, and it allows you to tutor or search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with a converted mana cost that is equal to or less than the number of colors spent to cast Bring to Light. And it's worth mentioning that you can't spend less than 5 mana on Bring to Light, but you can spend up to 5 different colors on Bring to Light. And essentially what it allows you to do is you play Bring to Light, and then you immediately play the tutored card. It essentially just ends up on the stack. And so we really wanted to find a way to take advantage of this. And so we did it in a pretty cool way. We decided to go with a little bit of a control shell. We are using energy because that is the engine that allows 5 colors to work. So we used 4 Harness Lightnings. We also really have been enjoying the card Unlicensed Disintegration, which is just a 3-mana destroy target creature instant. It has a bonus effect where it deals damage to the opponent if you control an artifact. We used Attune with Aether for mana fixing. We used Deathcap Cultivators and Servant of the Conduits for mana fixing. And then we just put in a bunch of payoff cards, things like Goblin Dark Dweller and Verdurous Gearhulk and Woodland Wanderer and Confiscation Coup and Fumigate, things that we decided might be versatile, things that we might need in some situation to win the game. So the idea being that we have a little bit of everything in the deck because we have access to anything we need at any time we need it. So if we need to wipe the board, we'll use our Bring to Light and we'll go get the Fumigate and clear the board. If we need a big over-the-top creature, we'll go get our Verdurous Gearhulk, and we'll drop an 8/8 trample creature on turn 5, which is kind of a tough thing. If they have a really cool creature that we really want, we'll use a confiscation. Cool, we'll take it away from them. So that's kind of the gist of the deck. And it was a lot of fun. And it was really cool because I very consistently was able to cast 5 color Bring to Lights on turn 5. And yes, very, very consistently. The major caveat to that was when I didn't have a Bring to Light on turn 5. But I would say that it was insanely easy to get to 5 colors by turn 5. And at the very least, you got 4 colors. And that was fine too, because there are plenty of 4 casting cost creatures or spells that you can tutor for. There were even some times where I used to Bring to Light to tutor for an unlicensed disintegration. It was a pretty cool concept. Our version of the deck had some weaknesses to it. The payoff cards that we chose weren't necessarily as good or as enticing as maybe we had hoped. There were ones where there were times where I had wished I had more of one of our payoff cards than we actually had. So, for instance, Verdurous Gearhulk is a card that I wish I had more than one of in there. And so I did a little bit of tweaking to the main board, and changed a lot of things. One thing that was very quickly apparent was we do not need dorks to get 5 colors. That was painfully obvious. So the Deathcap Cultivators were cut super quick, dropped it down to 2 Servants of the Conduit, and still had no issue getting 5 colors by turn 5. It was that fact alone was one of the most mind-blowing things about this deck, was just how easy it is. Those Attune with Aethers are super powerful, also very important. When I didn't get it in Attune with Aether early, I ended up running out of energy for my Aether hubs, which was problematic, to say the least.
Oh, okay. So even though you were running out of energy for colors, you still thought it was better to take the dorks out? Like, putting a couple of the Deathcap Cultivators back in there wouldn't have helped you in any way?
Possibly. The Servant of the Conduits I did leave in because they create energy. But the Deathcap Cultivators, they only really gave me access to one additional color type, because they're just black or green. Also, I learned really quickly that they died to Liliana very easily.
Yes, that definitely could be a problem.
So they were a very early cut, and I didn't look back too hard on that. We did include 2 Planeswalkers in the deck. We had Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, and the Tamiyo Field Researcher. Now, in the, close to 10 games that I played, I never drew a Tamiyo one time. And at one point, that was so annoying that I actually took her out. Also, because the original idea for having Tamiyo on the deck was as a draw mechanic, and I ended up putting extra tireless trackers in for some of the cards that I took out because of how effective they were. And so I didn't have any trouble getting cards in my hand to begin with. So I took the Tamiyos out, put in extra tireless trackers. Everybody loves tireless tracker. It's an awesome card. The Gideon was really great card to have as well. There was, when I was playing against the green-black Delirium deck, I got one turn away from winning against the number 1 green-black Delirium deck in 3. And that was all due to Gideon. Gideon was a workhorse in that deck. He was awesome.
Oh, good. That's what I suspected.
So I highly recommend.
And how many?
I'm sorry?
How many Gideons did you end up with at Desperate?
We just had 2. And that was plenty. You can't tutor for him with the Bring to Light, and you don't want to get flooded with him because he is a 2 devotion to white. So it's a little touchy in that respect. I also ended up putting in a Cataclysmic Gearhulk eventually, and an Avacyn eventually. And Avacyn also won me a game at one point, which was pretty cool. So I was really glad about that. I ended up bumping up the number of the Woodland Wanderers. I was very consistently able to get 6/6 Vigilant Trample Woodland Wanderers on turn 4, which was fun, to say the least. I did end up putting in a couple of the Skyrider Elves that we talked about last week, and they were nice because they ended up being really good 3-drops. There weren't a lot of turn 3 plays in this deck besides the Tireless Trackers, so they ended up kind of filling that turn 3 spot a lot. Or late game, when I was kind of short on cards and I would draw them, they were easy 5 5 flyers to drop into the battlefield. As for how the deck did overall against the decks, it wasn't super powerful. It did lose in 3, a close 3 to Delirium. I got Emrakul twice, which is why I won. I actually survived an Emrakul with a Fumigate, which was really nice. They dropped an Emrakul on me, and I thought it was game over, and I drew a Bring to Light and got the Fumigate and wiped the board and took out the Emrakul, and then I died to Hissing Quagmires. So,
yeah. that sounds like one of those like depressing ways to die. Like,
yeah, and
I've beaten everything, and then so like it's like the rodents of unusual size took you out.
Exactly. Yeah, you beat the boss only to succumb to the little minion that you forgot to take out in the anti-dungeon.
Okay, that's funny. So one of the cards that we were really excited about putting into the deck was Goblin Dark Dwellers.
Yeah.
So how did that one do in the deck?
It actually worked very well, to the point where I would strongly be in favor of adding a second one into the deck. I used it quite frequently, and one thing that this deck did really well, which is what we hoped it would do, was control our opponent's board a lot. It made for really, really long games, especially the Green-Black Delirium game. It was close to 2 hours to get through 3 games against the Green-Black Delirium deck.
Oh, wow. Jeez, just like everybody plays a creature and then the other deck kills it.
Correct.
And then...
Yes. But the point is, the control worked really well, and it was really nice to be able to bring back the Unlicensed Disintegration, to bring back the Harness Lightning. Actually, there were a couple times where I brought back Attune with Aethers too. So, which I had never even considered until I thought about it. I was like, oh, well, I need a land, and I could really use the energy right now. And so
we figured that was the fail case for them, where you'd usually be able to at least get back in Attune with Aether.
Yeah, totally. And, it's not a terrible thing to drop a 4/4 Menace creature either. It's just a decent creature. Menace is an underrated and annoying evasion ability. So I like, especially after a Cataclysmic Gearhulk. Now, sadly, I didn't ever get to cast a Cataclysmic Gearhulk. It was a very, very late edition. It's one of the probably one of the bad aspects of our testing method is, and that's just due to time constraint. We don't have the time to test this deck every day, all day. Is that I kind of modify it as I go. So I would love to be able to go back and play the Green-Black Delirium deck with the final-ish version of what I had eventually gotten to. But I didn't. So what are you going to do?
So one of the things that we were talking about, now we have sort of a lot of decks that we've built in this Kaladesh standard format. And before we get to Aether Revolt, is maybe to revisit some of the decks that we've already built. Maybe each of us takes one of our favorites, and each of us picks a favorite, and then on the podcast, instead of doing a live brew for the week, we would go and we would sort of take each of those decks to the next level. So we would do another round, since we really didn't give each deck enough time to make them really, really good the first time. But anyway, I think that would be really fun. So I was wondering maybe what you guys thought of that idea, and if you think we should do that or not.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
Yeah, so I think we're going to go ahead and do that, but not today. Today we are going to go ahead and brew a deck like normal. But honestly, I think the Bring to Light deck could possibly be one of the favorites. I mean, Bring to Light is such a powerful card that I would love to see if we could push it and bring it forward. And it's unfortunate that in our current testing with our current decks, we just don't get enough reps to really determine if the deck is really good or not. I mean, we try when we're playing the games. We try to note things like, oh, they got a good draw or they got a bad draw, or we got lucky or unlucky. But really, it's just not quite enough of a way to tell if really the deck is good or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I did get really inspired by our brew last week, and I brewed my own version of this deck. using the allies, and I didn't get to run it against the gauntlet. It ended up getting played in my local metagame, but I found that to be extremely aggressive. It was very hard hitting, over the top, and by turn 5, I was swinging for considerable damage with lots of allies on the field. It seems to me that the combination of the Bring to Light and March from the Tomb is a pretty decent replacement for Collected Company. It allows you to drop quite a few cards, rally allies onto the battlefield at one time, and also an inexpensive deck, because allies aren't that expensive because people think they're not that good, and for the most part they're probably right. But with this particular combination, it actually worked pretty nicely. It was fun to kind of hit my friends sideways and then be like, "You're playing allies, huh?" And then, wait a minute, I just lost.
That's only because he said that, though. I mean, he would have won if he hadn't made fun of it.
he jinxed himself.
Oh, that's great. Graham, I'm really excited and glad that you felt compelled to go out and build your own version of the deck, because that is honestly why we do the live brew.
Exactly.
We want people to be really excited about taking these decks and pushing them farther and farther. And I know that we've been receiving things from people telling us that they like our decks and that they like doing this, and we've received a couple lists, and please keep that up, everybody. We think that's really great, especially because there are 2 weekends left of the Standard Showdown. And so you can take one of these decks, take something spicy to Standard Showdown. I think it was Ben Bateman from the Masters of Modern podcast who said that he actually made it to the final in his Standard Showdown using the $15 stock Chandra deck that you can just buy off the shelf. Yeah, so you don't have to take like the sharpest deck out there, because this metagame is discovered. We know that these 2 main decks are the ones, the Black-Green Delirium and the Blue-White Flash. So you know what to expect out there, and they're not going to be looking for extra, spicy brews. So take them, because actually the prize packs for this are really cool. They are specially made by Wizards of the Coast for Standard Showdown, and they are essentially less cards, so you don't get as many cards as you get in a booster pack, but you get more rares and mythic rares and foils and I think uncommons too, that are from all of the sets that are legal in Standard. So it's a really good deal.
As well as the inventions are in some of these packs.
Oh, nice.
So you can get those really nice, juicy cards. And Expedition lands as well.
Exactly. And I was traveling this week, and I stopped by a local game store in La Grande, Oregon, which is a small town in the northeastern corner of Oregon. And their Standard Showdown was actually free to play. You could just go. They didn't have the normal $5 cost because the store isn't supplying any packs. Wizards just sent them all of the prize packs to give out to people, so you could just get a pack for just showing up. So definitely worth going and checking out. And there's very, very, very low risk of losing anything. Like, you have nothing to lose, is what I'm trying to say, by going there and bringing your deck.
Did you get to play?
No, unfortunately, I did not get to play. My family obligations sort of got in the way of that. I would have loved to play, but it didn't work out. But anyway, overall, Graham, maybe we should just sum up a little bit. So after testing this deck and playing a little bit, overall, how did you feel like it did? Do you feel like it was more competitive than it came out in our little rounds that we did?
Well, I struggled to find good bombs. So one of the things that we talked a lot about was, what are we going to fetch with the Bring to Light? And the things that we ended up choosing for the deck ended up not being nearly as effective as hoped. And I found a lot of times where I cast my Bring to Light and I looked through my deck like 6 times going, man, I don't really want any of these. None of these are going to help me right now. That was my biggest problem with the deck, was we didn't really find a good payoff for it.
Oh, really? So, So, you'd be too far behind, and, whatever you got wasn't going to, get you back in the game, basically, or...
Right. That, or it was not going to be effective enough, or it wasn't the right thing at the right time, or the card that I needed was already in play or in the graveyard because we only had 1 copy of it in the deck.
So, one, out of curiosity, when you cast Bring to Light, you were often like, oh, this would get me out of this, but it wasn't available to you?
There were times where that was the case. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Like, what was the card that you wanted more of?
I wanted more of the Verdus Gearhulks.
Okay.
Nothing like dropping an 8/8 trample creature.
So you feel like there were situations where that would have gotten you right back in the game?
Yeah, and I wish we would have included the Cataclysmic Gearhulk, because just as a nice board clear. To be honest, I was a little stumped on, and I thought about it a lot. What do I want in this deck? And I still don't really have a good answer for you. The Avacyn is really nice to have, but
it's not really the kind of thing you want to bring to light, though, because you lose all of the like surprise element and the invulnerability, like all that stuff.
Right, totally. I mean, it's nice to have Avacyn, period, but yeah, totally, exactly. And so that's kind of why that was the biggest question mark for me on the deck, because I didn't really have a good answer for what do we need to be able to grab in this deck.
I really thought Goblin Dark Dwellers was going to be a card that could turn the tables. Like,
it was nice. It was nice because it did offer the removal aspect, and it did get fetched quite a bit. That was one of my... If I couldn't get a Verdus Gearhulk, I almost always went to the Goblin Dark Dwellers. And sometimes I went straight to the Goblin Dark Dwellers just because I was able to cast a Disintegration from... Or a nice Disintegration from the graveyard. Or even sometimes I would cast a Harness Lightning and use 0 energy just for its... I needed the energy to make the Aether Hubs run.
Huh.
Okay, well, maybe if we do pick this deck to do a second round, we could maybe expand into 4-drops or find more options with 4-drops, or just try more cards. Like, we brought a pretty good list of cards, and maybe we just throw them in and try more games, and, you know, when you cast Bring to Light, we can just see what kind of looks attractive at the time.
Yeah, another one that I thought was really interesting that I never ended up using was Confiscation Coup. Not once. I couldn't... Against the green-black Delirium deck, there's not really a good card to cast it against, unless I have insane amount of energy so I can steal someone's Emrakul. It doesn't do me any good to grab an Ishkanah, because it's just a 3/5 reach creature. It doesn't do me much good to grab a Grim Flare if I don't have Delirium. There's just not a lot of good targets for the Confiscation Coup in the green-black Delirium deck. And the same is also true of a lot of the cards in the Flash deck. It's a sorcery, so I can't take a Copter. A Selfless Spirit isn't really that...
Oh, no, but you can take artifacts.
That's true. Oh, that's true. I can take a Copter artifact. That's a good point. It was never really what I needed at the time. I think that was just a result of the decks we were playing against. Taking away one single creature from either of those decks isn't going to break their deck.
Well, I mean, you're playing against the best decks in the format, right? So,
right.
I mean, that's kind of a damning... It wasn't good against the decks we were playing against. Which are the most popular and best decks in the format? So.
Sure, but when we built the deck, we were building it specifically to take on those two decks.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that was the goal. Yeah, I think I suggested Confiscation Coup.
I think Confiscation Coup is right for the deck. I think it just didn't work against the decks we had in the way that we had hoped. I think that for the most part, in your local meta game, in your Friday Night Magic, in your game day, it'll be a valuable card. It's always valuable to have the ability to take someone's creature away from them.
I'm sure it works great against Aetherworks Marvel.
Well, right, but I mean, I'm not saying that it's not good, but like we want the cards to be the best thing we could possibly get, right?
Sure.
So if your experience was, I didn't really want it, I think it shouldn't be in the deck. Yeah. Like if you wanted other things over it, it just shouldn't be there.
I think it belongs in the sideboard for this deck, because there's certainly circumstances where it would be really nice to have if an opponent had like a Noxious Gearhulk, or if my opponent had Gearhulks, that would be very useful to have. But the decks that I played against didn't run any Gearhulks.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So we will table this one for now, but you can go take a look at this list as we brewed it on our Tapped Out account at tappedout.net. You can search for Mox Team Zirconia, and it will show up there. And I also put a link directly to it in the show notes for you.
Yeah, and if you guys have any ideas on what our payoff spell should be, let us know. Tell us about it.
Yeah, because we want to know what you guys think of the cards that would go in the deck. We want to know what you would put in there. So please let us know. Okay, well, I think that's pretty good for recapping our deck from last week. Let's move on. Recently, we have been doing a sort of new series on Magic fundamentals and sort of bringing things back to basics so that newer brewers and newer players can level up and get some good ideas and better techniques for brewing decks, but also so that our more experienced listeners can sort of just touch base with the why and how of, basically the building blocks of how these decks are put together. So recently we have covered some very fundamental things like what is a card worth and kind of like what basic reasons or what reasons you want for tapped or untapped lands in your mana base. And Daniel, I think there was one more we did.
Card advantage?
Card advantage. Yes, we did. We talked about what is card advantage and how it works. So Daniel has a new topic for today that we're very excited about, but I don't really know much about it. So Daniel, take it away.
Thank you, Colin. We're talking about Pokemon.
What? Pokemon on the Magic podcast?
I've been playing a lot of Pokemon Sun lately. The 7th generation of Pokemon game just came out, and I'm a giant Pokemon nerd.
Daniel, we don't have nerds on this podcast.
I'm sorry, I'm a giant Pokemon aficionado.
Enthusiast, perhaps?
Like a cigar aficionado, but for Pokemon. Yes.
Okay. I'll take that one. That is more acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you.
So while I was playing Pokemon, I was thinking about how it's a deep game. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of strategy. And I was trying to think how I could apply the things that I was learning and the things I was thinking about to Magic. And the first good idea that came to me was sideboarding. So let me sort of set this up. If you don't know what Pokemon is, it's a game where you capture little monsters and you fight with them. But each of them has a type, which is sort of like an elemental type, like grass or electricity or dark. There's just sort of all these. There's 18 types, and each type has opposing types that it is super effective, which means it does double to it. Effective, which is just a normal hit. Not very effective, which is half damage, or it does nothing. So you're sort of at an advantage in some cases, you're at a disadvantage in others, or you're sort of, even in others. But there's 18 types, and they also get combined with each other. So sometimes like one effect miss will be negated by another. It's very complex. So it's sort of, I feel like it's a good, in terms of complexity, it's a good analogy for the complexity of the decisions you make in deck building, where you have this huge pool of possibilities, and you have to sort of narrow it down. And the reason that sideboarding came to me is because a central mechanic of the game is switching out your Pokemon. So you'll start with one, and then your opponent will throw one out at the same time. You throw your Pokeball, and they open up, and then a Pokemon comes out. And you may find that your Pokemon is at a disadvantage against your opponents because of typing or whatever reasons. And then at that point, you can skip your turn, so you miss out on doing your attack for the turn, and you swap out your Pokemon, and you put in one that has a better matchup. And there's a lot of different things that go into this. There's the typing thing, which I brought up before, which is kind of a rock, paper, scissors thing. It's not a straight rock, paper, scissors. Like, it's not like, oh, you have a grass Pokemon, I bring in a fire Pokemon, and I just flat win. That's not how it goes. It just gives you it gives you an edge against them. And the other thing is that there's also different sort of ways of attacking. Each Pokemon has two different defenses. So if you bring in a Pokemon that may not even have a type advantage, but attacks the right defense, like its type of attack works against that kind of defense, then that can be a good strategy too. So it's not just type. Like, for instance, when you're thinking about sideboard cards, it isn't necessarily just this destroys an artifact. My opponent played an artifact, so I will bring in sideboard cards that destroy artifacts, because it's more subtle than that. You want a card that is not only a counter, but sort of turns things in your favor. Like, you bring it in, and not only does it counter your opponent's card, but then they have to deal with your card. An example of this is a Pokemon that's sort of very defensive, but doesn't really have a very powerful attack. So sometimes you can switch it in, but it doesn't actually turn the tables in your favor. It just sort of stalls out the game. And you want your sideboard cards to come in and take over the game for you, if possible. The other thing that occurred to me that's really important is that in Pokemon, it's really important that you don't leave in a Pokemon that has a bad matchup. So it's not so much that you want to bring in something that's so great, you just don't want to get blown out. And I think that's a really good analogy for Magic, because when you're sideboarding, you need to figure out what isn't working against your opponent. That's like the first consideration you need to have. So at the end of the game, look at your deck and think about the matchup and take out what did nothing. Like, what's an example of, like, Graham, when you were testing and, like you were playing against blue-white Flash with the Bring to Light deck we were working on, right?
Right.
And you finished game one and you're just like, so you weren't actually sideboarding, you were tuning, but you were kind of sideboarding, right?
Of course,
like,
yeah.
Like you were altering, like sideboarding is like tuning, where you're like, oh, this card isn't helping me, I'm going to take it out and put in this other card.
Absolutely.
That was where you started, right? When you were
Yeah.
When you were working on the deck, you were like, this card just does nothing.
Right.
Well, I think a really good example from earlier was when we were talking about the Deathcap Cultivator from our Bring to Light deck.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that when you brought the Deathcap Cultivator in, first of all, you didn't seem to need it for the color fixing, and second of all, it just completely died to Liliana, so it was basically just a blank card in the deck.
So, right, like, although Deathcap Cultivator could have been really good in a theoretical matchup, it wasn't good in that matchup. So that was an easy thing to cut. Just because you knew that it was a liability in that matchup.
That's right.
So sideboarding is kind of like tuning your deck. Like you're just like, this card, it may be an awesome card and work in theory, but it just in that current matchup, you got to take out Deathcap Cultivator and put in, Transgress the Mind or Anguished Unmaking or whatever it is that's in your sideboard that's going to make things work out better for you. I think Anguished Unmaking is a really good example because it's a card that can both has a lot of versatility since it can exile any permanent, and also can deal with problem cards like Planeswalkers. Some decks just can't deal with Planeswalkers. Like they don't have enough of an aggressive bent to destroy them, and they don't have any cards that destroy them outright. So sometimes, that can be like the perfect sort of answer for your deck. But okay, so I think I touched on this a little bit before, but when I was talking about bringing in a defensive Pokemon. So when you're switching out, you want to bring in a Pokemon that is both not going to be killed by the opposing Pokemon, but can also turn things around. So in Pokemon, there's a concept called buffing, where if you're not threatened by the opposing Pokemon, then you can use a move to make your Pokemon more and more powerful. You use a move that like improves your attack and defense. And if you switch into a situation where you're not being pressured, you can take over the game that way. So I think for sideboarding, it can be a good thing to think about the cards being not just a counter, but also building up to a win. And I think a lot of times people just think of their sideboard cards as being defensive, but one really good example of a sideboard card that can take over the game is a Planeswalker. Because in for instance, some decks don't play a lot of Planeswalkers in the main deck because they're playing against a lot of aggressive decks, and the Planeswalkers just get destroyed. But in a slower matchup, sometimes Planeswalkers like Gideon, like Graham was saying that Gideon was really powerful in the Delirium matchup. And that's a good example because Delirium isn't like a super aggressive deck that's just like killing your Planeswalkers right away. So that's a sideboard card that isn't just a counter, it's also a way to win. So if you can do that in your sideboard, that can be a really powerful plan. Do you guys have any hard one? I mean, we basically haven't done any sideboard design at all. in the podcast, right?
Yeah, not really. I mean, sometimes we'll talk about cards when we're trying to decide if they make it in the deck or not and go, oh, that's probably more of a sideboard card, but we don't really deliver sideboards usually.
Right, and I mean, you can consider, like I was saying earlier, you can consider the tuning process to be almost like the initial sideboarding process. And then when you feel like you've gotten to a deck where you aren't, like, you like all the cards in the deck, then the sideboard could be thought of as the additional tuning, where during the process of tuning the deck, you were like, well, I can't go all in on this strategy because it doesn't work against blue-white flash, or it doesn't work against, Mardu vehicles or whatever. But then when you're sideboarding, you can be like, okay, now I can make the deck as powerful against Mardu vehicles as I wanted it to be, but couldn't because I had to hedge in sort of all these directions to make sure that I had a chance against all of the decks. So that can be sort of what the sideboard is for, is to shift your deck so that it is perfectly set up for that matchup.
Yeah, that's great. And so just to sum up a little bit and sort of repeat back to you what I'm hearing you say, because I don't actually know Pokemon at all. I've never played Pokemon before. But a couple of things that you've said actually are really interesting to me and really sort of made me think about sideboarding in a way that I had never thought of before. Usually when I'm thinking about sideboarding, I'm thinking about, or when I get to game 2, for example, I'm like, okay, so I really need this card and I really need this card. But thinking about cards that are just useless and need to come out as the first step is something that I just haven't done before, and that makes total sense. Like, oh, this card basically says nothing. It's going to get stuck in my hand. It's not going to do anything. So the way you put that with a Pokemon is with the different types of Pokemon, they just blank each other. Some of them have no effect on the other ones, so you just need to get rid of them and take them out so you don't get blown out. And so that resonated with me quite a bit. And then the other one was, for the cards coming back in, the idea that they don't have to be like the blowout cards that totally win you the game. They can just be the buff style Pokemon cards that give you just an incremental edge or a little bit of extra power or a little bit of extra something. Because sometimes I catch myself when I'm thinking about making sideboards and I'm thinking about, okay, what is the perfect card that I can bring in and just destroy the Black-Green Delirium deck? And maybe that's really not where it needs to be. Maybe it needs to be, like you were saying, just sort of like the extra cards that you wanted in the deck but just didn't fit, and now they do because you're taking the blank cards and the terrible cards out. So definitely interesting perspective, and so yeah, thanks for that.
And there's one more thing that I forgot to mention, which is that you have to be really careful when you're sideboarding. I mean, part of the reason to think about it in terms of things that you want to take out is that, I mean, sometimes a deck is so well tuned that you really can't, there's really nothing to remove. Like, aggro decks are a really good example of this because, I mean, aggro decks are pretty focused on doing damage. And to know what to take out to sideboard is sort of difficult because anything you take out could theoretically win you the game because all of your cards are sort of replaceable. You're trying to do 20 as fast as you can. So that it can be kind of difficult to figure out what to take out. It's just important to remember not to take out your too much of what makes your deck good.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Thanks again, Daniel, for bringing that up and walking us through that. I know that sideboarding is a very complex and nuanced thing, and that we didn't get enough time to really dive too deep into how that works. But hopefully that was a little bit of a new way to think about how sideboarding works when you're working on your own sideboards. And I think that sideboarding sort of deep dive is something that we will certainly look into doing on our YouTube channel when we start making our smaller YouTube videos. So anyway, Graham, any parting thoughts?
No.
Of course not.
Graham is a real man and doesn't use sideboards.
That's right. I build my decks perfect the first time.
He actually just does 75 card decks to start with, and then he doesn't need to.
Actually, his sideboard technique is just to put in 15 basic lands that are exact same as lands in his deck, so he just swaps them out and gets the exact same list in the middle between games.
I mean, the deck's already perfect. Why would you mess with a good thing?
No, think about it. It's actually a really great strategy. You sit there and between games and you're swapping out 15 cards and your opponent's looking at you like, holy crap, what could they possibly be doing? I have to sideboard like crazy to get around this. And all of a sudden you've beat them at their own game because they've sideboarded to meet your sideboard that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a situation where you end up outsmarting yourself.
No. This is good. This is the new secret tech.
Yeah. No, I think this could work. I think you're onto something here. Plus, then you don't have to think of a sideboard, which is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
And you don't have to pay for a sideboard because basic lands cost basically nothing. So it can really actually increase your budget for what you can spend on the real cards in your deck.
Sure.
Don't worry, Graham. I'm actually a genius. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Anyway, moving on. I actually have some good news for you guys.
Good news?
Oh.
What?
Yes. So, really good news. We were approached by Garrett from Sableye, the Mind Sculptor, and he is a Magic the Gathering YouTuber, which is someone who creates Magic the Gathering content and then posts it online. And he wanted to do a collaboration with us. So, what he has done is he has taken our black-red Eldrazi Aggro deck, and he has made a deck tech video for that deck and put it up on his YouTube channel. And basically, when we spoke, I explained to him the whole thing, like, hey, this is a first draft of the deck. This is untuned. As previously discussed, we didn't give him a sideboard, all of those things. And he went ahead and made the deck tech video and created a sideboard, which I think is pretty good. And he has also posted his first game with our deck, or his first round, I guess, with our deck on his YouTube channel. So definitely go check that out. Everybody, he does really good stuff. He makes deck techs. He makes his own brews. He does basically all the things that we love about, all the things that we encourage people to do. And so taking our deck and doing this is really great. And so we're really excited. He just basically he makes deck techs, he puts them online, he puts his games of Magic online, and he basically just crushes people and posts the videos. So it's really fun.
Oh, is he good? I haven't watched it. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to make good choices, and he talks through his thought process and decision making like a lot of streamers and people that record games do, and pretty good. And remember, we built that deck around originally Voldaren Pariah, which ended up not being very good. So I told him, hey, don't put Voldaren, just take it out of the deck when you're doing it. Take it. But he put it in his deck tech, and he explained. So when they gave me this list, they said, take out this card, and then he explains like what he's going to replace it with and everything. So yeah, I think he makes good decisions, and I'm really excited to see how it goes and how his round goes. And then hopefully after he has sort of tuned it and made it into a better deck and not a first draft deck, we'll have him on the podcast to sort of break it down, and we'll get him to tell us all about his choices and how he came up with those things, and it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I really liked that deck. That was a lot of fun to run. That deck just hit so hard, and it actually performed pretty well right out of the gate when we built it. So I'm really excited to see what he could do with it to make it even more awesome than it already was.
Yeah, me too. I think it's really great, and I'm really glad that he reached out and that we can collaborate with him. So listeners, go check out his channel. Go like his channel. Go like his videos. Once again, his channel is called Sableye, the Mind Sculptor, and you can search for that pretty easily. And
Mind Sculptor. I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, right? Amazing. A Magic the Gathering content creator named their channel after something magic related, like we did, huh?
Weird.
Yeah, not weird at all, actually. It's kind of how everybody does it, and I think that's great. But anyway, not only is he collaborating with us on this deck, but he has actually issued us a challenge. He has basically said, hey, I listened to your episode where you tried to flip Thing in the Ice, and I think that was the one where we made a little bit of our more... this isn't the way we should do it learning, because we were sort of using the wrong type of spells, but we learned a lot from it. And he said actually that a card that you really should be trying to flip, which is much more powerful than Thing in the Ice, is Westvale Abbey, which flips into Ormendahl Profane Prince, which I think is like 9/7 flying trample.
Lifelink, that's the most
It
important
actually doesn't have trample.
Oh, okay, but it's still like flying, lifelink, indestructible, basically big and scary and game ending.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, haste. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so He is recommending that we also include a new card from Kaladesh to help us achieve this goal, and it is Ovia Pashiri, Sage Lifecrafter, which is a creature, legendary creature for 1 green, and it's a 1/2. And it has a couple abilities. The first ability is 2 and a green and tap to create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And the second ability is 4 and a green to tap to create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is the number of creatures you control. So the idea being that you can sort of smooth things out, and just if you don't have anything else to do in your turn, you can create another creature, because of course to flip Westvale Abbey, we're trying to get 5 creatures onto the board. Or as an alternate win condition, if that's not working or we don't have a Westvale Abbey, then you can create a big colorless construct creature as an alternate win that can, be a force on the board that your opponent is going to have to deal with. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think Garrett is onto something, and that we should give it a shot, and hopefully we can build a deck that he will think doesn't suck and will be inspired to put on his channel and play out the games on his YouTube channel.
Oh, did he already make that commitment? If it turned out all right, he was gonna.
No. He just issued this challenge to see if we could make this deck.
We don't need a commitment.
Colin is optimistic.
He's gonna want to after he sees how good our deck is.
Yeah, he definitely is. I don't need the commitment ahead of time. I think that he is absolutely right. I mean, considering it was his idea, that flipping into a 9/7 indestructible flying creature is a pretty big deal and could be a lot of fun. So I think he'll want to play the deck.
Yeah.
Daniel, you're kind of like Ormendahl. You're 9/7, aren't you?
I'm actually 6'9".
Oh, close. And do you have lifelink?
I do have lifelink. I cannot fly.
Yeah. You don't fly. Okay, well, we'll have to stick with Westvale Abbey then. Sorry, Daniel.
I know your Halloween costume next year is going to be though.
Oh, that'll be great. Okay, so, gentlemen, I think that we should probably not rock the boat and talk about going into a tokens direction.
Sure.
I think that you can get a lot of them out really fast and flip them over really, really quickly, and I also think that there are some established patterns out there that... Oh, you don't think so?
A little bit of sarcasm there.
Okay, got it. Sorry, I wasn't... I was kind of in my flow there. Thanks a lot, Graham. But anyway... One of the things that I am actually worried about, though, in the deck is not drawing a Westvale Abbey. And what are we going to do if we don't have one? Because it seems like we're putting out all these token creatures for, they're not going to really hold the battlefield by themselves. I know that Ovia, however you pronounce that card name, is good at taking those creatures and turning them into big constructs, which is a decent secondary win condition.
Absolutely.
But I really do think that we should talk about some kind of method of helping to ensure that we do draw at least 1 or 2 Westvale Abbeys. And I think there are some options. There's cards you can tutor them out of your library somehow, hopefully, or we can maybe get them in there and out of your graveyard. So I don't know. I don't know exactly which direction we should go, but Daniel, did you have some cards in mind for doing this?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was a card that's just good. It's not a straight tutor, but Grapple with the Past digs a little closer to Westvale Abbey, and even if you don't hit one, I think the deck is going to be full of enough creatures and, lands, because decks are full of lands, that you'll get something good. So that was my first thought, Grapple with the Past.
Oh, okay. So you're thinking of sort of taking us in the graveyard direction, like get Westvale Abbey out of the graveyard, for example.
Well, not necessarily a graveyard direction. I just think Grapple with the Past is a good card. And I think that it doesn't necessarily tutor for Westvale Abbey, but it does put you 3 cards closer, and also just has utility throughout the game. I mean, just Erase Dead for whatever you want is never unplayable, and so it sort of serves a dual function in the deck.
Okay, sounds good to me. Grapple with the Past, and that one is...
Yeah, so it's 1 and a green for an instant, and you flip over the top 3 cards of your library, put them in your graveyard, and then put a land or a creature in your graveyard into your hand. So it doesn't have to be one of those 3 cards. It can be any card that's been put in the graveyard the entire game.
Yeah, I like that choice too because it's not just useful for getting. It's not single purpose. You're not just getting the West Vale Abbey with it. If you are creature starved, mid game, late game, you can drop one of these guys off and grab something back from your graveyard, which is always useful. It means that if you have one in your hand and you have to sacrifice a creature to a block, you can get him back later on. And you know that for sure.
Okay, I have one more card. There actually aren't a ton of cards that can get a non-basic land, but the other card that I came up with was Ulvenwald Hydra, which is a 6-mana reach creature with power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control, and it has a come into play ability where you search your library for a land and put it onto the battlefield tapped.
Interesting.
So it's a large reach creature, which has some decent utility in this format, I think. Also, anything that costs more than 4 sort of has some utility just because it can't be spell quellered. I was realizing this the other day when we were working on the Bring to Light deck, just that, usually you don't want to play a lot of expensive spells, but in a world where 3s and 4s are getting countered all the time, 5 and 6 doesn't seem as bad to me.
Yeah, I'm with you actually, because I've said over and over again that I'm so surprised that Torrential Gear Hulk is such a thing because it costs so much. But hey, expensive cards are powerful, and I think that this is a really interesting option for the late game. Maybe this is getting your second or third West Vale Abbey instead of the first one.
Oh, right.
Okay, so I'm on board with the Hydra. That seems like a pretty solid 2 of. What else are you thinking?
There's a few other cards to be used. There's Diabolic Tutor, if we want to go the black route. Although the cards are really inefficient and kind of makes me angry.
Yeah, I'm not really sure we want to go that way, especially double black. What about Oath of Nissa?
Oh, yeah. That's kind of like a grapple, but it only costs 1.
Yeah, I definitely like that it only costs 1 and that it's a little bit more versatile also in the fact that you can grab more than just the West Vale Abbey if you need. You can grab any creature or also a planeswalker, and it sort of goes through the top of your library. One of the downsides, I guess, is that because it puts the cards that you go through on the bottom of your library instead of into your graveyard, you can't then grapple for them later.
It's possible that Oath is just better than grapple in this deck. And I wish I'd thought of it because that is a good idea.
No, I like grapple though. So maybe what we should do is make Oath of Nissa the primary way that we're thinking about going and getting our West Vale Abbey, but still putting a couple grapples in the deck. For the late game, it would be better if there's some targets for it.
Sure.
And I think that we definitely are going to want as many 1-drops as we can get, but we'll play with the numbers as we go.
I am kind of nuts. I'm a 1-drop aficionado. That's what I'm trying to say. I enjoy. I'm an enthusiast.
So there is a sorcery that allows you to search for any land card. Do we not even want to consider that one? It's called Sylvan Scrying. It's 1 and a green. It says search your library for a land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Is that just too inefficient for our purposes? Because it doesn't. It's the same single purpose.
It's the same efficiency as Grapple with the Past, but I feel like it's too narrow.
That's what I'm getting at when I say efficiency.
Yeah.
It only does one thing, whereas Grapple with the Past is great because it can be used for other things as well.
Like if we had, for example, a powerful land that sort of took over the game in some way, I would like.
What you mean, like West Vale Abbey turning into Ormendahl? I mean, what is more powerful land than that?
What if you already have a West Vale Abbey? I mean,
I think I'm with Dan. I kind of want to just bring the card up just so that people know that it does exist. I didn't even know it existed until I started doing research into the deck. I had never seen it before. I'd never cracked one, and if I had, I ignored it.
Wait, have you not played Modern? In Modern, Sylvan Scrying sees a ton of play.
I do not play much Modern. I play pretty much exclusively Standard.
Are you familiar with the Urzatron deck?
No.
So Urza's lands were these lands where if you had all three...
I know the mine, the tower, and the power plant. Those ones?
So those decks play Sylvan Scrying to assemble the Tron, as it were.
Understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. So the deck sees a ton of play in Modern. I I guess part of the reason why I didn't, I mean, you could definitely play Sylvan Scrying in this deck, and it probably makes sense, but yeah. I mean, I tend to like cards that have, I mean, in the case of the Tron deck, it's so powerful and so important to get all 3 of your lands that it you just have to play it. But in this case, I think we're trying to do 2 different things. We're trying to get a Westvale Abbey, and we're trying to assemble a critical mass, little creatures. So the Tron deck, all it's trying to do is get those lands together.
Yeah, so you can drop Karn on
using
turn
a card
3.
that's all it can. Yeah, so like everything in the deck is pretty much expensive or a cantrip. So it makes a lot of sense in that deck. But this deck seems to be trying to do different stuff, and scrying doesn't necessarily always help you get to that point.
Okay. So here's what we should do. I agree that Grapple with the Past makes a little bit more sense than Sylvan Scrying for the purpose of this deck, just because of its versatility. But I do think we should also be open to looking for that in testing. So we might look at the deck as we're playing it and say, you know what, we're not getting enough cards into the graveyard, so I'm holding this Grapple with the Past, and I'm not getting the payoff of pulling those things out of the graveyard late game, in which case maybe we'd consider swapping in the Sylvan Scrying since they cost the same. So as it stands right now, we have the 4 Westvale Abbeys, we have 4 Oath of Nisses, which is going to be our primary way to find Westvale Abbeys that we don't draw, but having 4 of them is hopefully a pretty good percentage to draw 1 of them. And then 2 Grapple the Pasts for late game, so that we can still hopefully get them back. And then we have the 2 Hydras, Ulvenwald Hydras, which is another way to tutor it. So I think it's good. So now maybe we should move on to how we're going to flood the board with tokens.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so token decks have kind of been around. They're kind of a thing that people are aware of, and there are some sort of tried and true methods of bringing tokens onto the board. But Graham, I was kind of wondering if you had any particular ideas about how we can sort of update those ideas, maybe if we're using servos or we're using something with some newer synergies, maybe and adding another color or 2 colors because it's so easy to fix nowadays. What are you thinking?
I considered 2 to 3 colors, potentially 4, depending on the nature of the tokens that we go. I was thinking potentially red if we decided to go exclusively servos. I can see a benefit to having Reckless Fireweavers. Not super thrilled about that route, but it seemed like it had some potential. What I was really leaning towards was green and white, and I was kind of thinking along the lines of Planeswalker creation. So Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and Oath of Gideons.
Ooh, Oath of Gideon. Tell us about that one.
So Oath of Gideon is another legendary enchantment, and it's 2 and a white, and it says when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 1/1 white core ally creature tokens, plus each planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. So that's pretty good. And if we're going to be running Oath of Nissas anyway, it seems like a no-brainer to me that we should probably run some other planeswalkers.
Yes, I completely agree. Okay.
So the Gideon, the 2 abilities that I'm most interested in from these planeswalkers, Gideon, his 0 ability is put a 2/2 white knight ally creature token onto the battlefield. It's super awesome. It's very versatile. Gideon sees tons of play all throughout Standard for all kinds of reasons, and it's never a bad thing to just put a 2/2 white ally creature token onto the battlefield, and in this particular case, it helps us quite a bit. The Nissa ability that we want, and we like Nissa because she's also a 3 casting cost planeswalker, so you can play a Nissa on turn 3 and then a Gideon on turn 4. How cool would that be? But her +1 ability is to put a 0/1 green plant creature token onto the battlefield, which who cares that there's 0/1 green plant creature tokens, because we're just going to sacrifice them all to the Westvale Abbey anyway. Or her -2 ability is to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, which could be super useful if we're having trouble flipping our Ormendahl and are going to go the wide route.
Yep. Okay, I think that's good. So how much does Oath of Gideon cost? Casting cost?
3.
3. Okay, so yeah, that's probably a 2 of, I'm thinking.
That's kind of what I figured it would be as well. I feel like all 3 of those are probably two or 3 ofs at most. And then I had a couple of other interesting ideas. Black was a really enticing option for 2 reasons. We all know Daniel loves weapons craft enthusiasts.
Where did you hear that? Who told you that?
I don't know. I heard it on this crazy podcast I was listening to.
Sounds crappy.
Anywho, that's one option because he accounts for 3 creatures, which is very useful in what we're trying to achieve. The second creature that I really like for this deck is Zulaport Cutthroat. If we are going to be sacrificing our own creatures, let's get as much payoff from it as we possibly can. Zulaport Cutthroat is a 2-drop. He's a 1/1 creature that says whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. And that seems pretty dang dandy to me, especially if we're going to be sacrificing large volumes of creatures all at one time. If we want to go the black route. It seems like it's pretty easy to splash colors in this format right now and not have it too bad. If we ran 4 Zulaport Cutthroats and 4 Weaponscraft Enthusiasts, that's 8 black cards. I don't see a ton of other need for other black cards in this deck that would fit very well, but these 2 seem to be really on point. You seem dubious.
Not really. I just want to see if there's any way we can super maximize what we're trying to do, which is either get cards back to get Westvale Abbey or to put a whole bunch of creatures onto the board to sacrifice for Ormendahl, the Profane Prince. And I'm not sure that adding another win condition with sacrificing creatures is actually a direction I think I want to go.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm feeling like I'm in on the Weaponcraft Enthusiast.
But there's not a ton of need for black outside of Weaponcraft Enthusiast. So I was trying to, if we don't go more than just Weaponcraft Enthusiast, it might not be worth having even Weaponcraft Enthusiast. There's might be other 3-drops that we can use that get us to where we're going to go, or something cheaper.
Right. Well, actually, I was thinking, since Daniel is such an aficionado of 1-drop creatures, I think we should really try and pull it in that direction and see if we can get as low of a curve as possible. So I think that this deck definitely wants Thraben Inspector for its 1-drop and its extra card. And the other one I was thinking of is actually Thraben Standard Bearer, which is also a 1-drop and a 1/1, and you can pay 1 and a white and tap it to put a 1/1 human soldier token onto the battlefield, which to me seems like it'd be a really good way to basically turn land drops in late game into creatures, which is kind of what we want.
That's the worst Crypt Breaker I've ever seen.
Okay, yeah, Crypt Breaker. Why can't we run both of them? I mean, really, I just want to be able to turn lands into creatures. So they both do that.
Yeah, I guess I'd rather run Crypt Breaker if we're going to do that. If you're excited about that effect, let's just run Crypt Breaker.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we just have to decide kind of if we're feeling like we would rather stay more in white or go ahead and lean towards black, because it might be a little bit difficult with...
Well, what are we getting from white? We're getting Thraben Inspector... Thrabes, as it were.
Yeah, and we're getting Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, which is a double white devotion.
Yeah, and actually there are plenty more very useful white cards that we haven't even got to. I would push very strongly for white in general. We just haven't approached some of the cards that we're getting to yet. So, for example, why don't we just go there now? Hanwer Militia Captain is a good example. It's a 2-drop. 2/2, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform it, and then it spits out a 1/1 white and black human cleric at the beginning of each end step.
Okay, so like during your upkeep, you have 4 creatures. It flips over. That's the end of your turn. You get a creature. So
that's right.
Assuming it was the 4th creature, you get an extra creature.
So 2 1-drops, and then this 2-drop, and then your end step, and then you can just flip into Ormendahl?
Wait a second. So turn 1, 1-drop. Turn 2, 2 1-drops. Turn 3, Militia Captain. Turn 4, flip over.
Yeah, but it's in the end step that you get that 5th creature. Although...
Well, but you can flip into Ormendahl at instant speed, so you can do it at the end of your opponent's turn.
That's true, too.
Okay, I'm in for 4 Militia Captains. I think that is a good way to get a bunch of extra creatures on the board.
I just feel like you're...
That might be one to...
I have a feeling that you're not going to get that to flip as often as you think.
Well, maybe we are going to be populating the board pretty hard with. I mean, the whole goal of our deck is to put as many creatures out as we possibly can.
Right, but other decks destroy your creatures. I mean, it feels like we should just be using cards that create more than one creature rather than a card that conditionally will slowly create creatures.
Okay, fair enough. How about Angel of Invention, which is a 5-drop flying vigilant lifelink angel that has Fabricate 2. So yes, it's a 5-drop, so it's later in the game, but it does create 3 creatures from one card, potentially, or one really big creature.
Aren't you missing one of the abilities?
Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, Fabricate 2. Oh, and I am. Good point, Daniel. It also makes all of our creatures better because other creatures you control get +1/+1.
Yeah. That card's sick. That's like exactly the kind of thing we want in this deck.
Exactly, and that's kind of an example of why I was thinking white.
Yeah. I mean, Gideon's fine. I think it's a great card. I don't know if it's quite as focused as everything else because it's not that efficient, and it's fairly efficient. Like it makes a token every turn. So you make one the turn you play it. If it survives, you make another one. But the idea here is that we're trying to flip it fast, and I don't actually think Gideon flips it fast. So, Angel of Innovation, I think that's exactly what we're looking for here.
There are a couple other examples of useful cards for flipping Ormendahl in white. Do you guys like the card Servo Exhibition? 2 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens for 2 mana, 1 and a white.
Love it.
Oh yeah,
Colin?
definitely
Yeah.
in on Servo Exhibition.
How do you guys feel about a card called Not Forgotten? Another sorcery, 2-drop, 1 and a white, says put target card from your graveyard on the top or the bottom of its owner's library, and put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield.
Hate it. Should I go into more detail why I hate it?
Yes, Daniel,
Okay.
you definitely should because our listeners are desperate to know exactly how you're going to smash all of our dreams.
Okay, let's assume that it didn't have the put a card on the top or bottom, right? Didn't have that ability.
Sure.
That's not a good deal.
No.
That is not a good deal. A 2 mana for a 1/1 flying token, not a card we want to play. And
okay, what if you played on turn 2, you played a Servo Exhibition, and on turn 3, you played a Not Forgotten, so that on turn 4, you could play another Servo Exhibition, a guaranteed Servo Exhibition. That's 5 creatures on the battlefield right there. So on turn 5, you got an Ormendahl.
how about turn 3? You just play the 3 mana white Fabricate creature instead of the Not Forgotten, and get 2 more creatures.
The
Jeez.
Glint Sleeve Artisan.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. The Glint Sleeve Artisan.
It's 2 and a white for a 2/2 Fabricate 1 creature. I think that's it. I am not super pumped on Glint Sleeve Artisan. Is it Artisan? I don't know.
Yeah, Glint Sleeve Artisan, it's called.
I like Not Forgotten because of its versatility. I understand your qualms with it. But it's
target card, right? It's
target
not
card.
conditional.
Creature, land.
Yeah, so you could put an Oath of Nissa back on top and dig through your library some more.
You put a Oath of Oath
Wait,
of
how
Gideon back
is
on
the
top.
how is the Oath of Nissa in your graveyard?
Yeah, it's
if you play a
legendary,
second
so
one?
you have to put one in the graveyard.
Oh, if you
play
play
another
2.
one, because the legendary rule kicks in. So that's actually how they get in there most often, I think.
It doesn't put it in your hand though. It puts it on top of your library.
That's right.
It's a little slow.
It is a little slow. Hey, I am simply submitting it for your consideration. I think that it has some potential, and it does what you asked me to provide cards that do. If that was terribly convoluted.
No. I actually followed your train of thought. I just think the card's weak. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't technically like fulfill the mission statement of the deck. It's just that I just think the effects of it are just kind of weak, and they just don't push you towards victory, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yes, it's a little bit weak, but one thing we haven't talked about is how it actually doesn't say your graveyard, it says a graveyard. So you could use it to put a card from an opponent's library onto the bottom of their deck to turn off Delirium.
Sure. Or if your opponent is mana starved and you want them to remain mana starved, or if they're flooded, you can take a land or a not land out of their graveyard and put it on top of their graveyard to ensure that they
on top of their library.
Thank you. On top of their library to ensure that they remain in said state of flood and or starve. I guess you can't. There's no and there. You can't be flooded and starved. That's not a thing.
I don't know if this is a real argument or not, but that card doesn't get played in draft. Like, that's how weak it is. Like, literally, people won't play that card in draft because they don't think it's strong enough.
I'm sensing a veto from Dan. That's fine.
The card's not good. Like, I can't, like, put it in any stronger terms. Like, it's too subtle an effect to be played in a good deck.
Okay, it's out.
Thank you.
I'm not doing it.
Thank
Not
God.
Forgotten is forgotten.
It is forgotten. I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Well, let's recap. Where are we at, Colin?
So we're doing pretty well. I think that what we need to do is sort of get the final opinion on Glint Sleeve Artisan.
Well,
no one seemed excited about it, so let's just leave it out.
Well, it is a 2-for-1 though, and it is a 3-drop 2-for-1. So do we just want to run 2-for-1s because we have 8 of them available?
Not necessarily. I mean, we might just want more little creatures or more. I mean, are there any more token generators other than Servo Exhibition that are like?
Well, there's the puzzle worker, the cog worker's puzzle knot.
That's like 5 mana for 2 creatures, though, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, it's 4 for 2. It's not super great.
That just seems flat. That seems flat worse than Glint Sleeve Artisan, for example.
Hey, you asked for other things that did what they do, and I provided.
Thank you, Graham. I appreciate it.
Well, what do you guys think about Sanitarium Skeleton, which can bring itself back from the graveyard after you sacrifice it?
Are we already playing black?
Well, see, I don't know. I'm trying to decide. Is there any way we can do black and white and still?
Well, how about Catacomb Sifter, which is 1 black and a green for a 2/3 devoid Eldrazi drone. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion creature. But the cool thing is that whenever another creature you control dies, you scry 1.
So that is a 2-for-1 for 3, right?
2-for-1 for 3. Plus you get the extra ability on top of it, the scry ability.
Okay, I like that better than Glint Sleeve Artisan.
Yeah, but do you like it enough to add a 3rd color? Like, I mean, I know we've been talking about how easy it is to play extra colors, but
yeah, that's a good point. We're not playing any of those fixing cards.
Sure, but I mean, it's kind of like, I don't think like Catacomb Sifter is good enough that like you want to just be like, oh, it's so much better than Glint Sleeve Artisan. We should be like really stretching our mana base to include this thing.
Well, what if we pair it with Weaponcraft Enthusiast, Daniel?
Oh God, you know my Achilles heel.
Yeah, if I can tie the card to Weaponcraft Enthusiast, maybe Daniel will like it.
I'm not feeling that strong a pull towards black, to be honest. Even though I love Weaponcraft Enthusiast, I think you guys are right. I think white is the way to go here, and I'm just honestly, I haven't heard a card yet that I'm just like, oh yeah, that black card needs to be in the deck, and we should like really screw with the mana to make this happen. Like I just haven't. We're already playing double white in Gideon, double white in Angel of Innovation. We like want green and white as 1-drops like early in the game because we're playing. How many 1-drops are in this deck? We have a ton. Like there's Oath of Nissa. We have Ovia Pashiri. Have you talked about that?
Actually, that brings up a really good point because we have so many 1-drops. What are our draw mechanics look like? Do we want an Ulvenwald Mysteries so that we have a clue engine that also gets us creature tokens?
Yeah, I don't think we want Ulvenwald Mysteries.
What is Ulvenwald Mysteries? That's a fairly complicated card, right? Why don't we talk about what that does?
So Ulvenwald Mysteries is an enchantment. It's green and it costs 3. And it says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you investigate. And it also says whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token onto the battlefield.
Well, I'm not saying that card isn't any good. It doesn't really seem to play into our mission
of creating creature tokens?
No, of like getting Ormendahl flipped fast.
Oh, right. It's not gonna.
It's kind of a
it's
long
more of
term.
It's more of a long play. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think of ways that we can keep cards in our hand and flip Ormendahl.
So, Daniel, do you think that that card is powerful enough that it could possibly be a sideboard card that we can bring in if we face a particularly grindy long match?
Well, the only problem that I see with that is that it requires them to be non-token creatures.
And we're already playing servo exhibitions, so like a lot of our creatures are servo
Most of our
exhibitions
creatures are going to be tokens.
Yeah, Angel of Innovation. Yeah, we have Ovia that creates tokens. Yeah, maybe that's not right for the deck.
What other options do we have for card draw in green and white? Do we want to run copters?
It's not card draw. It's just filtering.
Well, I mean, is that a bad thing?
I mean, that would help grapple with the past a little bit, right? Put some extra things in the graveyard for you to pull back.
I mean, it's
we got plenty of pilots.
It's true.
And you don't even have to use the looting ability. It's optional.
Again, I'm feeling like it's a little off topic. I'm not even saying that it wouldn't be good in the deck just because it's a good card, and it would probably be good in the deck. But
and
it doesn't.
Hey, none of Nissa's plant tokens fly Smuggler's Copters. So,
is Nissa the Planeswalker? Is that the 3-mana Planeswalker? Was that in Magic Origins, or was that in?
No, she was in.
That was in Battle.
She was in Oath of the Gate.
Oh, are we already playing that card?
Yeah, she's been on the list for the same amount of time as Gideon. We talked about them
voices.
earlier.
Whoa, I must have checked out then during that part. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention during that part.
Yes, she is from Oath of the Gatewatch, and she's only $5.
I know, isn't it a mythic Planeswalker?
Yeah. I mean, are there anything besides mythic Planeswalker?
Popularity is a hell of a drug.
Oh, hey, here's an idea. I know this isn't quite on topic, but since we're playing so many small creatures, what about a Bygone Bishop?
Oh, I guess that fulfills your request for some card draw.
I was just looking for a little bit of card draw. If we're going to be playing lots of small creatures, you're going to be burning through hands pretty quick.
What does Bygone Bishop read again?
He's 2 and a white for a 2/3 flyer. Whenever you cast a creature spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, investigate.
Doesn't match up well with Smuggler's Copter. That's my one.
Well, we're not playing Smuggler's Copter because you vetoed it in this deck.
No,
already.
I believe he means playing against Smuggler's Copter.
Oh, I see. I was confused because he'd already poo-pooed that card for not being right on mission.
A lot of things don't match up well with Smuggler's Copter, so it's not really a reason. Yeah, it's sort of a dumb argument. Oh yeah, that awesome card is awesome. That's kind of basically what I said.
Yeah, I think pretty much nothing that costs so little matches up against Smuggler's Copter, so I'm not too worried about that. I think that the card draw will still be worth it, so I think that's good, and I think we should put a couple of those in there.
Oh, hold on a second. What if I told you that there was a 4-drop that allowed us to double all the tokens we had in play? Would that excite you?
Maybe.
Actually, in this deck, it might. Although, yeah, I've never been able to run that card before.
Second Harvest, 2 and 2 green. For each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that permanent.
But we have a lot of non-token creatures. Like, we're basically split evenly between tokens and not tokens.
Yeah, that's true, but we only need 5, so if it could get us an extra 2 and flip him, we're good to go.
Doubling any amount of creatures is, if we have 4 tokens in play by turn 4, which is totally doable with the way that we're building this deck right now, how cool would it be to all of a sudden have 8 tokens on turn 4?
I think with Servo Exhibition and Nissa being so cheap, it is very possible that we will be able to have enough tokens on turn 4 to make this worth it.
Plus, it provides a lot of back-end power in a longer-running game.
Yeah, Dan, I think you're going to be mad, but I do think that we should try 1 or 2 of these for science.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Okay, Dad.
Yeah, and I just mean really just for science. I want to see if this is the deck where Second Harvest works. It might be the only one.
Just let me know if Glint Sleeve Artisan would be better in those situations, because I'm gonna bet 75% of the time you'd rather have Glint Sleeve Artisan when you play Weird Harvest. Is that what it's called?
No, it's Second Harvest.
Oh, there was a card called Weird Harvest. So that was played in like one of the most broken elf combo decks ever.
Oh, okay. See, I thought you were just making fun of the crappy card that we want to put in the deck by calling it something bad or different.
No. There's an actual good card called Weird Harvest, and I was confused.
An actual good card?
Yeah, an actual good card called Weird Harvest.
No. Okay, where are we, Colin? How are we doing?
So right now we are at 55 cards.
Ooh,
so we just
55,
need to fill in a little bit.
Wait, this is before lands?
No, I've put lands in there. I just haven't put the exact.
So
Oh,
do
okay.
we need control of any sort, or protection, or other type of cards?
Wait, is Cryptolith right in the deck?
It is not in the deck
Ooh.
right now.
Well, I'm not sure that we need
Well,
to.
it seems like it just fights the Hydra a little bit.
And not only
It really fights the Hydra? What does that mean?
Well, the Hydra has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So if you tap your creatures to play the Hydra, you might end up with like a 2/2 or a 3/3 Hydra, which doesn't seem as good.
Well, actually,
like it seems
so
like it wants to be
Daniel,
bigger.
your question about the Cryptolith rights, I'm not sure that it's necessary for this deck just because how low our curve is. We don't need that land. We don't need to tapping our token creatures for land.
Cryptolith Rights is how you crack all of your clues at the end of your opponent's turn.
It's also how you
That's true.
activate Westvale Abbey.
That's fair enough too. Okay.
Because
Well,
you tap all the creatures for mana, and then you sacrifice them.
You know I don't like it when you use logic and reason to make your point, Daniel.
No,
It's just rude.
The original Turbo Westvale Abbey deck was the Louis Scott Vargas Pro Tour deck, which is a green-black deck, and he used Cryptolith Rights and little stupid 1-drops to like super fast crack Westvale Abbey. So like a deck of this kind has existed before. We're just doing a spin on it with like a lot more cards in the format. So, or different cards.
Okay, so how many Cryptolith Rights do you think this deck wants, Daniel?
Oh, I think 2 or 3 would be fine.
Okay, I'm leaning towards
Like you
3.
definitely don't want more than one because people aren't going to destroy it, and the second one does nothing. So having more than one is kind of bad.
Yes, true. Bad in multiples. Okay, but I still think 3 is correct because I feel like I'll never draw it if I have 2, and the opportunity is just too high. So I think 3 is correct.
Do we want to run just some Declaration and Stones for a little bit of creature removal?
Ooh, I got one. If you want some removal, how about Fairgrounds Warden?
I don't hate that idea because it gets us a creature and it also removes things. It's also, yeah, you know what? You know what, Daniel? Well, here's the rub though. When you sacrifice it to create Ormendahl, you give somebody their creature back.
I don't know if you've checked recently, but Ormendahl is the king of the battlefield. So whatever it was that you got rid of. Wait, can Reflector Mage hit Ormendahl?
Wait, isn't he hexproof
no.
though?
No, he is not. He is indestructible. And
Never mind. You would never field war or what's it called? Fairgrounds Warden. You would never warden a Reflector Mage. Not even I'm that dumb.
I don't believe it.
That's okay. I believe in you, Daniel. I think you can do it. Okay, so status. Right now we are over 60 cards, so we actually need to pare back a little bit because adding those extra removal guys is too much. So let's talk some numbers here.
So my recommendations for paring down, we should maybe drop to 2 of each Planeswalker. I don't think that 3 and 3 is necessary.
I'm willing to cut down the Gideons, but I still think 3 Nisses is necessary.
I think we should cut down on the militia captains because I don't think it's that good.
Really? I don't know.
I know you guys like it. But
Well, it just makes so many creatures.
I just don't think it's going to trigger as often as you think it will.
Okay.
Like that's a lot. 4
We also-
creatures?
All right,
We
I'll
also
go down to
have
3
a ton
on
of
those ones.
2-drops in the deck, period.
That's not really true. I feel like we actually have several 2-drops. So we've got the Grapple with the Past and the Cryptolith Rights, and then we've got the Servo Exhibitions and the Handwear Militia Captain. I actually feel like we're doing okay for 2-drops. Actually, if anything, I think we're a little bit heavy on top, so I think I'm going to cut down to 1 Second Harvest.
Boo!
Yay!
No, actually, I think that Second Harvest is a one of. It'll be awesome when it fires off, but it would be bad.
Wait, how many Handmer militia captains do you have?
The right number?
Oh,
Oh.
you should take out a second harvest and put in a third Handmer Militia Captain. Even though I don't like Handmer Militia Captain, I still think it's better than second harvest.
Yeah, but we're doing second harvest for science.
That's right. We're just trying to see if we can completely maximize our token generation.
Play more Angels of Invention. Card's great.
Cost 5.
I
Second
mean,
harvest costs 4.
you get a lot.
No, this is a good thing. We're going to test this card out. We're going to see how it goes. And then next week, we can see how it did and we can argue about it. But I think we should definitely leave it in. Still a little bit too many cards. And I'm just worried about the number of Cryptolith rights here.
I don't think we need to draw Cryptolith rights.
And that's one of our 2-drops too. It's one of our
Yeah. I think that you should go down to 2 Cryptolith rights. That's one of those ones where in tuning I can add them back in if needed.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right choice. I think we are going to need them, and I think you'll discover that.
I like it. I think it's good.
I was going to say...
I think we're still a couple cards. Man, we're really close. Maybe
drop to 1 Hydra? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that card's expensive, but it's also one of the ones that directly tutors for Westvale Abbey, which is what we're trying to do.
I mean...
it's just... All the cards, it's just too good.
Everything in here is good. You gotta cut somewhere. I would advocate.
But I really do think that you're going to want to draw Cryptolith.
I know, and I'm thinking 1 Cryptolith right and 1 Ormendahl Hydra.
I'm okay with cutting down on a Hydra. I mean, I don't think. Yeah, I'm not a huge 6-drop person.
Okay, so as Deckmaster, I think what I'm actually going to do is I am going to cut the 3rd Nissa so that I can leave in the 3rd Cryptolith right, because I do think we need 3 of those. And we will go down to 1 Ormendahl Hydra, which will put us at 60 cards. So, running 23 lands, 4 Westvale Abbeys, the green, white, dual lands. And then for creatures, we have 2 Angel of Invention, 2 Bygone Bishop, 2 Fairgrounds Warden, 3 Handwear Militia Captains, 3 Avia Pashiri Sage Lifecrafter, 4 Thraben Inspector, and 1 Ormendahl Hydra. And then we do 3 Cryptolith Rights, 2 Oath of Gideon, 4 Oath of Nissa, 2 Grapple with the Past, 1 Second Harvest for Science, 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, 2 Nissa Voice of Zendikar, and then 4 Servo Exhibitions. So, I think that in testing we'll definitely monkey with the numbers a little bit, and I think that we're going to try out those things, and we can't forget to try out Sylvan Scrying. I think we should do that at some point, just to see if it ends up working better than Grapple with the Past. But yeah, I think actually this seems like it could actually work. It seems pretty good.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it works. I think it has tons of potential, and I think that Ormendahl is disgustingly powerful, and so I like playing disgustingly powerful cards because I like to feel powerful.
Okay, great. Well, everybody head on over to tappedout, grab that list, and try it out. Let us know how it goes. And I suppose that is our show for the day. So thank you guys so much for being here. Please go tell all your friends. Get excited about the podcast. Go out and play at the Standard Showdown and have a great time.
Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. And you can even friend us on tappedout.net, where we post all of our deck lists from the live brews, including a list of all of the cards that we may have discussed offhand or off the cuff or whatever. So if you're following along while you're listening to the podcast, you can find all those cards. And
well, we should say most of those cards, because I'm not perfect, but I try.
Also, you can find us on Twitter at Zirconia, or email us at moxzirconia@gmail.com. and send us your list after you've tuned our sweet deck. We want to know how it worked for you.
That's right. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks again. Bye.